Hi, this is Eugenia Mitchell, host of At Home with the Mitchells. Thanks for listening to the following podcast on Public House Media.
Strike three, you're out.
Welcome to another edition of Caught Listening on the Public House Media Network. Christian Heimall here with you. As always, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts, Google and Apple Play, Spreaker.com, Stitcher.com, iHeartRadio, and of course, you can check us out on publichousemedia.org. That is the first week of May and begins what we are calling here on Caught Listening the month of the fan. I mean, you guys are what makes the show go around. You're what makes sports go around, and I know you guys are all missing live sports as much as anybody else. But this week's show, and really kind of next week's show too, aren't necessarily what you guys might think. We're not exactly gushing over fans. It's kind of pet peeves and ways to improve the fan experience at the ballpark, starting with you, the fans in general. To help talk about this and share some of his experiences is baseball writer Ted Berg. And Ted, we appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
No problem. Thanks for having me on.
And real quick, I mean, before we get into any of this stuff, how are you doing? How's the family? How's everything going on with what we're experiencing here in our new normal?
I mean, all things considered, I almost feel guilty saying it, but I've got it pretty good here. Everyone's healthy. I've got a lot of time to spend with my son, and he is a little too young to really understand what's going on, so I haven't had to have any difficult conversations or anything like that. So. Really, relatively speaking, I can't complain.
Well, I mean, it's obviously what you can the best you can hope for in that sense. So, we're talking kind of pet peeves about fans. And, again, for those of us who have been around baseball for so long and seen it at different levels, whether it be as a fan, as a writer, whatever it might be, you see people who act in ways, or you see trends that come in ways that are not exactly exciting. So what's one of your biggest pet peeves that you see a lot of baseball fans really kind of go through when at the ballpark?
Well, I mean, I have a bunch of them, and they all stem from really from being a fan first and foremost. Before I was ever a baseball writer, I went to a heck of a lot of Mets games growing up, and so one for me has always been scores of people streaming for the exits early. I always and I get it now. I think now that I'm older and now that I have a kid of my own, I can understand the desire to sort of move it along if there's a nap time in play or a bedtime in play. But I know growing up, I was always so miffed at people I thought, weren't in it enough. And I remember even one time leaving a Mets game. I must have been 14 years old or something. They were down by 6 runs, and my friend's father, who had taken us, wanted to leave. And then we left, and then on the drive home, Carl Everett hit a grand slam, and they came back. And I think that was the last game I ever left early. I think a big one that gets to a lot of people is the wave, of course, and how often it's done, and sort of the annoying circumstances that it sometimes comes in.
We're going to talk about that because I'm on the same page. Like I'm on the ban the wave bandwagon. I'm a huge proponent of that in seeing it. There are very minimal ways to do it right, but there are so many other ways that it is done. It's funny you talk about people leaving early because one of the memories that just sticks out in my mind of me growing up as a baseball fan and going to games myself. I remember in high school, I was living outside of Baltimore, and it was myself and 2 of my buddies and our girlfriends, and we went to an Orioles-Red Sox game on like a Wednesday night when it was $12 tickets, and we sat front row in left field, and the Red Sox are up like 4 or 5 in the 7th inning, and everybody's starting to leave, and they're all like, they were all mad. They all wanted to leave, and the next thing you know, the Orioles start scoring, and I think it ended up being like a 1-run game in the 9th inning, but it's amazing to me that that's the one that still is probably the most consistent, is people leaving early, especially considering the price of tickets now. I understand the length of games, but the price of tickets now and how much, craziness you can kind of see just by sticking around at a baseball game, because you never know what's going to happen anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's the only sport without a clock, right? And so, I guess other than tennis, so it's the one sport where a team can come back. And the example of the pleasant example I always think of is, a Mets game. I was a vendor at Shea Stadium, and then I would, you'd finish up around the seventh inning or eighth inning. And in those cases, I would sort of sometimes leave an inning early if the game seemed out of hand. But one game, for whatever reason, the Mets were down by 8 runs. And I was like, it's a nice day. I'll hang out. It was fireworks night. And so I knew people weren't going to be leaving early. And people weren't going to be leaving right when the game ended. So I figured, I'll sit down and watch an inning or two here without having to work. And the Mets scored 11 runs, I think, in the bottom of the 8th inning, came back to win the game against like their biggest rival at the time, the Braves. And it was one of the best games. I mean, I think a lot of Mets fans of my generation would say it's the best game they've ever seen. One of the best games I've ever seen in person for sure. And I only stayed sort of on a whim. So, it's since then, again, it's that sort of thing where you have that experience one time and then from then on forward, you're never going to leave early again.
Right. And the funny part is you and I talk about this as former as journalists who have been to baseball games and have sat in that press box, and you almost sit there in the press box and you're just kind of hoping for the game to end at some point. You hate to see those 11-run, those late inning comebacks, because then you got to completely rewrite the whole entire story, which is just kind of funny that you see that a lot of baseball writers, a lot of baseball journalists, sports journalists for that matter, grow up as fans, obviously. And then when you start working in the industry, I can remember years ago when I was in college, we did the Islanders games on our broadcasts, and all of us, every time the game was potentially going to go into overtime, we were all annoyed as could all be. We didn't care whether they won or lost. We just wanted the game to be over. But as fans, you want to see your team win more than anything else.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, the best example of that for me, I was on recap duty for USA Today for Game 7 of the 2016 World Series when the Cubs wound up winning with the 9th inning comeback after Rajai Davis put the Indians up in the top of the inning. And there was like a brief rain delay in there and like just the chaos. And people are saying like, oh, how lucky you were to be at that game. What an incredible, baseball experience. And, as much as I liked the job and was happy I got to be there, that particular game was like a nightmare. I mean, that was just a nightmare because it was, it was rewriting, like the stress of it. You were just, with so many eyes on that game, especially because it was the Cubs, coming to the end of this massive, World Series slump and the Indians had one going too. It was just like, you knew you had to get the recap in the moment the game ended, and I had no idea how the game was going to end. It was crazy.
Yeah, and but it's so funny. I mean, and we're talking about fans leaving early here as one of our biggest pet peeves for baseball fans. It's interesting to me. I think the biggest part that bothers me about it is it's because of it's one of two things that bothers me. I think number one is you're there and it's your home. It's your team that you're there. You're going to see. So we'll take the Mets for example, and you're going to a Mets game. You're a Mets fan. But your team's struggling, you don't want to even show them any more support to stick around to the end. Or you're a Mets fan, you're seeing them up big, and you just feel as though you don't need to stick around to continue that support. It comes back to me, if you're going to be a fan from start to finish. It almost kind of shows, like, everybody talks about it, they use the term bandwagon, and for me, bandwagon is almost as bad, if not worse, than leaving a game early regardless, because you're not being a fan all the way throughout the game.
Yeah, I mean, I hesitate to tell people how to be fans, but I would say certainly, for me, it's, I want to stick it out. Again, like you said, it's a lot of money to go to a baseball game, and I want to get my money's worth. And I want to, and the more lopsided the game seems, the crazier it's going to be if it turns at some point. And so for that I want to stay. And I think I have so many more examples of times I've stayed when it's paid off, than times I've left and just been like, oh, I'm glad I left that one.
Right.
So, it's sort of a positive feedback loop. Like I was at, Johan Santana's no-hitter that I went to just because I went to as a journalist because it was the game Carlos Beltran made his return to Citi Field after leaving the Mets. And I had no reason. I didn't need to cover the game. I was like, it's a nice night. I'm at the park. Why not stay? And then, and Santana pitched a no-hitter. Like, I'm so glad I stayed.
Right.
So, I have those experiences and then they sort of, they pile up and they lead to me, lingering at a lot of lopsided baseball games, honestly. But it's usually there's something to have fun.
Well, and it's insane too, because the one that I think about, I think back to when you talk about something crazy is I think back to, I think it was 2007 when the Rangers beat the Orioles like 30-3 or whatever it was. And you just don't know what you're going to see. And that's the insane part. Like, baseball's been played for over 120 years, and you still could see something you've never seen before, whether it's a second baseman.
All the time. Like, that happens all the time, I feel like. You know, like, it's like once a week in a game, I see something I've never seen before. And I've seen thousands of baseball games.
Right. And that's the insane part. You know, it took me 30 years to see a triple play live. It took me 30 years to see an immaculate inning live. And like, these are just random things that like you don't think about, you don't see. Or, you know, you get guys who are scoring from second on a sacrifice fly. Like, it's just random things you never think you could possibly see before. And I think that's one of the other issues in leaving a game early is you never know what you're going to miss. And that's a huge part of it for me is because it's not like, you know, basketball, yes, you have a time limit. You don't know if you're ever going to see a 60-point game or something like that, or a guy go 15 for 15 from three, something like that. But it's just, baseball's so different in just how crazy it can possibly get. And that's, for me, again, one of the biggest reasons. Support your team, but also you never know the crazy thing you're going to see if you stick it all the way out till the end of the game.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. Like, I just keep coming to other examples of times it happened to me. I had to go back to college on the night that the Mets won in 15 innings in a playoff game against the Braves in the late 90s when Robin Ventura hit the grand slam. I campaigned. I remember my dad saying, like, I was going to get on I went to college in D.C. I was going to drive right to LaGuardia. It was right next to Shea Stadium. Get on the Delta shuttle, the last Delta shuttle in the night, and go down to D.C. And I just said, no, I got to go tomorrow morning. Like, there's no way I can take this flight, and no way I'm leaving this game. And then the Mets won, like, one of the best games I've ever seen. You know, so yeah, don't leave the game. Don't leave the game. You'll miss something cool.
Moral of that story is don't leave the game. Another one that's huge for me, and I've been on this kick since I was probably 9 years old. I don't know how you feel about it, but if your team's not playing, don't wear the jersey to that game. You know, I used to, you know, again, I went to high school outside of Baltimore. I used to go to a lot of Orioles games, and I remember going to like Orioles Red Sox or Orioles Indians games, and inevitably there'd be a guy with a Jeter jersey, or, you know, you go to a Nationals game and it's Nationals Phillies, and there's a guy there with I don't know, pick it. It's an Astros jersey, it's a Cubs jersey, whatever it is. That just because you're at a sporting event doesn't mean you need to wear a sports jersey, in my opinion.
I'm with you on that. I mean, I think I was like, I feel like the sports apparel thing sort of became a way bigger part of being a fan after my childhood, honestly. Like, I remember, like, you'd wear your hat. If you had a t-shirt, you'd wear a t-shirt. But now it seems like everybody in the park is wearing the gear for their team. I certainly, it feels like a little bit of like a troll move if you're going with another team's jersey on. I remember being at a game with like a Red Sox game where four guys showed up in Roger Clemens Yankees t-shirts. Like, you're just there. It wasn't a Red Sox Yankees game. It was just a Red Sox game. And, you know, it's like you're just there trying to bother people. Like, why? Why do you want to do that? I'm with you on that.
And it goes within divisions too, because again, like, I grew up a huge Red Sox fan, going to Orioles games. You go to Orioles Red Sox games, there's a guy there in a Yankees jersey. Or nowadays, it's you go to a Mets Nationals game, and there's a guy with a Chipper Jones jersey. You're literally only there to troll. It makes no sense.
Well, and I'll say by the same token, and I've seen it happen at Red Sox Orioles games. I find nothing more small time than when the Red Sox and Orioles fans all break into a Yankee suck chant.
I'm so glad
right, because it's like, oh no, you're not even playing the Yankees. Right. This like clearly implies a chip on your shoulder that you need to get over. Right, you're playing the Red Sox. Worry about the Red Sox.
100%. I'm so glad you brought that up too, because I've been to multiple games at Fenway Park. You know, I think I was there. The last time I was at a game in Fenway was a couple of years ago, but it was like Red Sox Blue Jays. And it's like the 10th inning. They're in extra innings. And for some reason, a Yankees suck chant breaks out. There's no need for that. It's unnecessary. You're not even playing them. And, you know, it doesn't matter. I can't stand that stuff. It's not as if Jeter's, you know, watching the game when the Yankees aren't even there. There's no, or Clemens, or pick any Yankee of the past. There's no reason for you to be doing that. The only, and I try to find ways to excuse people almost, for some, like the jersey thing. Like if it's someone who transcends the sport, like for me, Jeter, Griffey, Mike Trout now, like, okay, maybe I'll give you a little leeway as long as you're not being a clown. You're not being the guy who's just there to troll people. But because it's someone who's so transcendent of the sport, I might let it go. Similar to like a Yankees suck chant, like if it was a guy who like the previous year just played for the Yankees or something and it's a blowout,
right,
maybe.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Are there exceptions to that for you?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if you're trying to, I don't know, if it was like Don Mattingly ran out onto the field to get in a fight as the Marlins manager and you wanted to hit him with the Yankee suck chant, like maybe, like at least there's like some relevance to what you're doing. But yeah, in most cases it feels like, and I'm not a Yankees fan by any stretch, but, and again, I grew up a Mets fan very much in Yankees territory. So I get it. I understand the sentiment, but it always feels like such a small time thing to do. Like it just feels like you need, like, chant Yankee suck when you're playing the Yankees. Exactly. You know, that's when you do that. Otherwise you're letting the whole world know that they're in your head.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so here's the other thing. A couple of other things that I think these ones are kind of more generic and kind of like, okay, you know, we get it. One of the things that bothers me a lot is inevitably, no matter where you sit, and I remember the old Yankee Stadium, the bleacher creatures, they were a different level. And I'm so glad that some of them have maintained in the new Yankee Stadium. But at almost every sporting event, there is that one guy who has been tailgating for too long, and his buddies have been egging him on and continuing to buy him drinks even though he shouldn't be. I'm not so much mad at that guy. I'm mad at the friends who won't tone him down, who won't bring him back to normal or just remove him. That is the one instance, in my opinion, where you need to leave a game early, is if your buddy is so drunk that he is being belligerent to other fans and ruining other people's times, you need to have that self-awareness to get them out of there.
I am convinced that Sammy Sosa had his breakout not because of steroids, but because of one guy who was sitting about 6 rows ahead of me at a Mets-Cubs game in 1997, who was so drunk and so loud and just kept calling him Sammy Soso. And I 100% feel like Sammy Sosa heard it, got so offended that he decided to go hit 66 home runs the next year. Because the guy like would not shut up. So Bill Murray happened to be sitting next to me at the game. Then the guy noticed Bill Murray, called attention to Bill Murray. Bill Murray gave him the finger. It was a whole scene. Poor Bill Murray now had like people coming up and harassing him. He was just sitting there trying to watch the ball game. And all because this one drunk moron couldn't shut up.
Yeah. The best part about that, I mean, the Sammy Soso is just, I mean, it's a good move, but again, at some point.
It was pretty good. It was pretty good. It was pretty funny the first time. And then like the next 30 times, you're like, okay, we got it. You came up with a funny joke.
And that's the thing. And that kind of brings me to another one too, is hecklers in general, you know, and they get worse, obviously, the more inebriated they get. But if you're not getting a good reaction the first time, don't continue down I remember being at Wrigley Field few years ago for a Cubs-Pirates game, sitting out in the bleachers, and this guy kept just hounding Andrew McCutchen out in center field, and the first time he got a little bit of a chuckle, and then he kept going at it again, and after the third or fourth time, you could tell people started to get annoyed, but this guy, who hadn't even really been drinking, at least it didn't seem that way, just continued to go on, and it's self-awareness, I think, that is a big issue with a lot of fans.
I think you're 100% right about that. I mean, I don't think anyone normal thinks, oh, these people, the 30,000 people at this baseball game are here to see me, right? And yet there are people who sort of carry on like that's the case, right? Like I've heckled, right? Like I've been a young drunk guy at baseball games myself and yelled out some dumb stuff, but you gotta know the place and time. You gotta know the situation, whether you're getting a positive reaction, who you're heckling. I don't know. It's just, yeah, you're right. There's gotta be a limit to it in any case.
100%. It certainly has to be. And especially the thing that I always look at too, and now working in the front office of baseball, it's making sure that fan experience is, because that's the thing is, not only do you hinder, first off, people may not know you, it may not matter, but there are people around you who are going to now look poorly upon that team that you're at because they didn't do a good enough job, preventing that situation from escalating. I mean, I remember the very first game I ever went to go see at the old Yankee Stadium was Red Sox Yankees, and I sat in the bleachers because I kept being told that's what you got to do. You got to get that full immersion. You got to be heckled. You got to be yelled at and chanted at. But the one thing I was impressed by was the Yankee Stadium staff who, when they noticed someone who was too far gone, they went and they removed him, and they did a very good job of that. And so, for me, I did. I felt a little scared going into Yankee Stadium for the first time.
It was terrifying. In the old Yankee Stadium, it was terrifying sitting in the bleachers.
It really was. But I always felt as though it was never going to get to the point where I was fearful for anything to happen. Like, it was just kind of like the first time you go, it's kind of like, okay, what's going to happen? And then once you get through it and you realize that, hey, as much as these fans are passionate for, and I put that term in quotations, the staff there is making sure that everybody is safe. And that was a huge thing for me. And the problem is when you have people who aren't aware of that, or who, fans who aren't self-aware and are ruining, it just puts a bad thing, not only on you, puts a bad thing on Yankee fans, puts a bad thing on the stadium, on the organization. Same thing with Red Sox fans who start chanting Yankees suck at Fenway Park when it's the Blue Jays in town, like we were talking about earlier.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm with you on all that.
So it's incredible to see, and it's just fun. One of the things we're talking with Ted Berg, baseball writer here, about, baseball fan etiquette, I guess, and just making sure when we get back to baseball, I hope some people listen to this and maybe they think about it and they're at least aware of it. There's an interesting one, I think, for this year, what would have happened if we, were playing baseball right now, and that is the Houston Astros shame tour. And I kind of want to get your thoughts, what we saw in spring training, the consistent booing, the cheering when guys are getting beaned. It was going to be further scrutinized and magnified this year more than ever, but it is still something that from a fan etiquette standpoint, I think needs to at least be looked at. And that is this idea of booing opposing players or cheering when that opposing player gets beaned.
I think it's two separate things, right? Because I think booing to me is part of the fun. Mm-hmm. Like it's sort of a cathartic thing. And I think, I would say I have a lot of thoughts on what the Astros did. I think first and foremost, I don't know if it really helps as much as people probably assumed it helped. I certainly don't think they were the only team doing it. And I'm sure, to some extent, most teams were probably, in the past few years, have probably used, more than just on-field signals to try to steal signs. It sounded like, I think a lot of guys from the 2017 Astros spread out. I think a lot of front office members of the 2017 Astros spread out, and coaching staff members. So there's no way it was, just this one evil team that took it upon themselves to cheat and nobody else was doing anything like it. I just don't think that could possibly be the case, but they did it. They got caught. They won the World Series from doing it. So I think it's totally understandable to boo them. I think you have to know that's the risk when you do that type of stuff, just like, guys did when they, took steroids or whatever. You have to realize you're not gonna be the good guys anymore once you're if you're going that far with cheating and when people find out. So I'm fine with booing. I think that's just a sort of a reasonable way to punish them for that. We're rooting against you. You've made yourselves the wrestling heels here. Mm-hmm. Cheering when a guy gets hit is a different thing because getting hit with a 100-mile-an-hour fastball can kill you. I don't know. It doesn't make me, I don't think, I think some of the ones that got cheered in spring training were clear accidents. I think it was Altuve got hit with a curveball in the top of the foot off the bounce and people cheered like it was intentional. It was ridiculous. I wouldn't personally cheer if someone got drilled. I think that you got to come up with better ways to get your aggression out and make people pay. And I think letting them know you don't like them is fine. I think that's a fine extent. And I think that there's probably, if you're like one of these guys who's, out to punish the Astros for their crimes against baseball, to me, that raises a red flag about like, what was your deal? Because it always felt like in the steroids era, which was sort of our previous big example of widespread cheating, it often felt like the guys who were the loudest protesters had something to hide themselves. And so, if someone's like, I'm taking it upon myself to enforce the unwritten rules of baseball and punish these guys for what they did, I'm going to try to figure out what his teammates are up to.
Yeah, no, I 100%. And I think that's, that goes to a deeper thing about the unwritten rules of baseball. But 100%, if you're one of those guys, one of these who's just out to, protect the integrity of baseball, you got to make sure your kitchen's clean too before anything, comes down on you. But the booing, I think, is a big part. And I think that's kind of the easiest way. I mean, everybody figures out whether it's chanting Daryl or Larry at Chipper Jones, whatever it might be, fans have to find their way to come after kind of the heel, as you said. But I can't remember who it was. Someone said something, like, if they're booing you, it means you're doing a good job, something like that. So,
right.
And that's, it's
right. They don't boo nobodies.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think that might be Reggie Jackson, right?
Might have been. Yep. It might have been. But, because again, I mean, when A-Rod ended up with the Yankees, of course, everybody in Red Sox Nation was booing him because they felt jilted, number one, but number two, he's also playing for the other team. So, I wonder how many Yankee fans were booing John Olerud the year he went and played for the Red Sox. But, I think it's kind of built on who that person is, because like we were saying, they don't boo nobodies here. So we're talking with Ted Berg, baseball writer here on some pet peeves, and we're going to have Ted back next week because I want to chat with him. And one of the reasons why I wanted to bring Ted on in the first place was because a couple of years ago he had written, I think it was actually last year, a few years ago actually, basically rules on when to do the wave. And that's a big thing. And I know it's a big topic of conversation in baseball, but we're going to touch on that next week because I feel like that's a whole show, Ted, that you and I need to just basically discuss the wave and whatnot. But we've come to a point in the show called Pepper where our listeners submit questions to us via social media, which you can look for us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Caught Listening by Public House Media, or you can email the show, caughtlisteningphm@gmail.com. And you and I give some quick hitting answers back and forth. Ted, the first one here comes from Mike. Which pet peeve do you think is the most ridiculous pet peeve for baseball fans? So I guess, which one of these things that some people hate do you find to be a ridiculous thing to be hating?
That's a good question. I get it. I think a lot of people do hate booing more than I do, right? Like and we'll talk about it more. I think that some people hate the wave so strongly, and like I'm sort of ambivalent toward the wave. Like I think that people who get super mad about the wave when it's like a 9-0 game and the fans are doing a really good job of the wave, like, yeah, you can dial it back a little bit. It's not the worst thing that's ever happened.
Right. It's like quit screaming at the one cloud in the blue sky kind of thing there. So
right.
for me, it's, and I don't know how much you know about this, I've kind of turned a little bit. I was really against it years ago, and I've kind of come, I think I've just kind of accepted it. I don't know if it was the Pink Hat fan it started in Red Sox Nation, I think in like 2008 or whatever it was, but it was this idea that, girls and women who wore pink hats to baseball games weren't true fans. And I think that's a little ridiculous. At the start of it, I could kind of maybe see it because a lot of the times it was girls who were taking the picture for the Instagram or whatever it is. And I'm sure there are some who are still like that and maybe they didn't understand it. But if you're really hating on somebody for buying, your team's, gear, but in a different color and for social media purposes, they're at the game. Just because they're not paying attention, you have any idea how many 6-year-olds and 8-year-olds there are that aren't paying attention? You have any idea how many 60-year-old corporate men are there spending thousands of dollars who aren't paying attention to the game? There are other things to be mad about than someone wearing a pink hat on a baseball game, for me.
I think I'm with you on that. And I think, honestly, like, they do so much at the game now to let you not pay attention, right? Like it's almost like you're encouraged to not pay attention with how much is going on at baseball stadiums now. That like I said earlier, like it's sort of kind of like, look, if you want to go out to a game and have fun any way you want. Like anything I say here is a guideline maybe, but I got no issue with pink hats. If you like the look of a pink hat, wear a pink hat.
Exactly. And then the last one here that we have is there a tradition, a ballpark tradition somewhere that you've seen that you don't understand or that you hate that fans do?
Well, I mentioned the Yankee Duck chant at Red Sox Orioles game.
I think that's the biggest one.
That's a good one. You know what I would say? Any place besides Wrigley, where people throw back opposing home run balls. Like, I know that that's a Wrigley Field tradition, and I get that there. But if you, and it's not, and look, if you want to throw back the home run ball, fine. I don't like it when they pressure you to throw back the home run balls, and you see it happen and people cave to the pressure. You catch a home run ball, who cares who hit it? It's like a once in a lifetime experience. You want to take that home and like have it in your room for the rest of your life. I don't want to throw it back on the field. They have baseballs down there, right? Like, this is my baseball now. Don't yell at me and don't force me to throw it back. I'm not going to do it.
I'm 100% with you on that. 100% with you on that. And honestly, that wasn't even one of the ones I was thinking about. I was kind of torn between, I worked in minor league baseball in Iowa and people outside of Iowa who do Field of Dreams references. Like that, for whatever reason, I don't know why that bothers me, but it does. It's like, I don't, there's no need. You're not in Iowa. You don't have Kevin Costner. Shoeless Joe's not coming out of a cornfield. You don't even have corn in this state. Why are you doing it? Like it's, so, but I'm fully with you on the throwing the home run ball back. That's 100%. I don't understand. Yeah. Okay.
So kids, if they try to make you do it, if you're listening and you're at a game and you catch a home run ball and it's the opposing team and they try to make you not throw it back, just don't do it. Just don't cave to the peer pressure, right? Like, you want that ball. You're going to want that ball. You'll be the villain for like 10 seconds until the next pitch is thrown. Just keep the ball if you want it.
Then where do you stand on there's so much to talk about with this stuff. Grown men with baseball mitts in foul territory.
I mean, I wouldn't do it myself. I think you look kind of silly going in with a baseball mitt. And I think if it's me, I'm like, I've caught, as a fan, there have been, one time I was at, actually, it was like the first game I went to at Citi Field with my family, and a foul ball landed in my dad's nachos, and we kept that ball. And another time while I was a vendor, I caught a foul ball and I gave that away. I think now I would 100%, now I would be with my kid most likely, but, right. If I wasn't, I would 100% give it to a kid. Like, it's gonna make the kid's year, and it's just a baseball.
1,000%.
You know,
if you're over the age of, I don't know, you're over the age of, I'll just say 25. You're over the age of 25 and you get a foul ball and there's a kid by you, give it to the kid. You know, be a good person. Be nice in that sense. I would even say 18, but so I'm glad we at least agree on that stuff. He's Ted Berg, baseball writer, talking pet peeves here on Caught Listening. Next week, I want to touch on a few more of these, get into a little bit more about fan, engagement, fan personalities, and then of course we'll get into the one that seems to be maybe for some reason it's gotten really controversial. This whole idea of banning the wave. It actually causes rifts in my family. My little brother has been yelling at me for years about, he hates going to baseball games with me because I get mad when people do the wave. But I get mad because in certain situations. We'll talk about that and stuff next week. But for now, Ted, I appreciate the time. And if you could, let the people know where they can check out some of your stuff.
I'm on Twitter at OG Ted Berg, and you can check out, I got a personal blog, tedquarters.net, sort of writing about everything, a lot of food stuff, some baseball, all over the map.
Ted, we appreciate the time, and looking forward to talking with you next week.
No problem. Looking forward to it.
All right. It's Ted Berg, baseball writer. And again, if you guys have questions, if you want to be a part of the show next week, again, it's all about the wave. It's all about, your whatever pet peeves, something we didn't discuss, something you want to bring up, a rebuttal, by all means. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Caught Listening by Public House Media, or email the show, caughtlisteningphm@gmail.com. You can find Ted on Twitter at OG Ted Berg, BERG. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, share us with your friends and family. We are on Google and Apple Podcasts, Spreaker.com, Stitcher.com, iHeartRadio, and of course, publichousemedia.org. You can find me on social media as well, at Chris Heimall, ChrisHeimall. It's the month of the fan. We're doing everything we can to talk about you guys. Sometimes it's good, but sometimes, like this week, and maybe a little bit of next week, it's bad. But again, we know for a fact we wouldn't be here without you guys, the fans. We are so grateful. Stay safe. Stay healthy. Until next week, you have been caught listening.